Welcome to the Phillip Wylie Show. Take a look behind the curtain of professional hacking and hear compelling discussions with guests from diverse backgrounds who share a common curiosity and passion for challenges and their job. And now, here's your host, offensive security professional, educator, mentor, and author, Phillip Wylie.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Phillip Wylie Show. Today I've got the amazing Mishaal Khan joining today. We've been connected on social media for a while, but we finally got to meet for the first time at HackSpaceCon. Was that last year or this year? It was this year, wasn't it?
This year, yeah.
Yeah, this year.
Seemed like a while.
So the first time we got to meet, so I'd seen all the amazing things that Mishaal has been doing online and, you know, all the trainings and stuff he's doing and his book and all that. So we'll get into that. But thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on. It's an honor to have you on. It's pretty amazing the things that you're doing, and we'll dig into that. So I usually ask my guests at the beginning of the podcast to share their hacker origin story. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience kind of, you know, your origin story up until what you're doing now today.
Sure. I mean, my origin story is kind of like Mr. Robot. My dad used to have a computer business, a computer repair shop, and I was exposed to a lot of computer parts, a lot of PC parts, and eventually laptops. So I was used to assembling PCs. I started on the hardware side, so this is me when I was like probably 12 years old or 13, and we used to assemble our computers, play games, and then early in the stages we had like DOS, and then eventually Windows 3.11. And we used to me and my brother used to crack games. We used to be very interested on how to skip a level, and we used to look at the files. They were pretty simple. They used to come on little floppy disks and stuff. So we used to just explore through the text files, and programming was fairly straightforward back then. So we kind of discovered how to program and then how to break code just by looking at some of the files and reverse engineering. This is back in the 90s. And our motivation then was to skip a level or to get into God mode in Doom or something like that. And that kind of motivated us. And then a lot of websites started popping up. We started creating websites. I started, manipulating websites, search engines. And I was never malicious to start off with, but I was always curious. I was extremely curious on how things work. What is a web host? Where is it getting the data from? So that kind of piqued my interest into the tech world. And a lot of my initial few jobs were around either programming or networking or PC support. Tech support was a huge part of how I started off, and then went into the basics of networking, worked for companies like Cisco, and had a pretty good understanding of how things work. And then I would say throughout my career, I had that hacker mindset where I was being approached by people I knew, friends and family and colleagues and students in university, and they would be in trouble and say, "Hey, someone hacked me. Could you figure out who it is?" Or, is my boyfriend cheating on me? Can you spy on him or stalk on him and see what's going on? I used to create phishing emails and stuff, and this is back in the early 2000s and stuff when the word phishing probably wasn't even around. And I did a lot of borderline, maybe unethical stuff, but nothing malicious, so to speak. And my intention was always to help people out, see what's going on, see who the stalker is, maybe unhack their accounts, get their accounts back. And I was very quickly known as that guy in the community who could get things done. You had a problem, an online problem, Mishaal can solve it. And still today, when people's printers break down, they call me. But that's kind of how I started in this, and I've stayed in that space throughout. I was always curious, and I kind of eventually evolved that field into OSINT, or open source intelligence, because I took all those little tricks and tips. I said, how can I monetize this? How can I make this into a career? So I started off with pen testing, did all different types of pen testing, was really good at it. And where my passion lied was open source intelligence, and that's kind of where I landed today.
Very cool. Very interesting story. I didn't know your background. So that's one of my favorite things about the show is getting to learn more about the guests. A lot of folks that I know from the community and don't get to learn that much about them until they join the show. So as far as your background goes, was this all self-taught, or did you go to university anywhere or take any kind of training?
I would say it was mostly self-taught. I did computer engineering back in the days because I grew up around hardware and I wanted to know more, kind of a formal approach on microprocessors and stuff like that. So yeah, I do have some early education, formal education on computer hardware and software. But I would say majority of the things that I do today or in my career, like pen testing and programming and stuff like that, that was all self-taught, all either through books back in the days or YouTube videos today or smaller courses online, low-cost courses. But everything I did throughout, I would contribute all of that to being self-taught.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And one of the things I would say too is probably back when you were getting into OSINT, there probably wasn't a lot of resources on OSINT, imagine.
None. It wasn't even called OSINT. At some point, they called it reconnaissance when it became like into pen testing. But when I was doing it, either they called it snooping or stalking and stuff like that. But it wasn't really OSINT. And some of the techniques we use today, which are formalized in OSINT, I was using them when I was a kid and just through normal discovery and curiosity.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So for someone that wanted to get started in OSINT, what would you recommend?
Well, I would recommend start doing real world challenges. I would say do OSINT on yourself first. Try to dig for information on yourself. Because as you do OSINT on yourself, you know validation. You know whether you're in the right direction or wrong direction. So that's the best way. Or with your friends and family members, with permission, say, hey, I would just want to look you up, or your spouse or kids and stuff like that. As you start there, you'll know if you suck at it or you're really good at it. And you'll start developing interest and saying, wow, I could find so much information about myself online. Let me see what else I can find. If it piques your curiosity, which it will, then start taking these fundamental OSINT courses. I created one course on justhacking.com just a few weeks ago. It's called Beginner Level OSINT. And I basically teach all the fundamental skills you need to get started within OSINT. Then I also teach a very advanced level OSINT course called Next Level OSINT, which goes into some of the hacking methods to use intelligence and really dig for information. That's on a whole different level using hacking tools like Kali Linux and Burp Suite and certain other creative ways of finding information that are usually not really taught or publicized online. So there's a whole spectrum of OSINT from beginner level all the way to advanced. And then there's also, it depends on where you want to do OSINT. So if you say you're curious in OSINT, I want to do OSINT, where do you want to do it? As a journalist, as a pen tester, as a researcher, or as an investigator? So depending on what you want to do as a job, the type of OSINT that you will learn will be very different.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about that. Just to hear you mention like journalists and research, that it's kind of interesting that that's one of the few areas that you can really carry over, because if you're doing digital forensics, you're going to use it in law enforcement or
right,
as a consultant or within an organization doing investigations. But it's really cool that you can use OSINT in other areas. So if someone's not in the security realm, if they were a journalist or something, they could really sharpen these skills and possibly pivot more over to the security side of things if they wanted.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of people think that OSINT is a very technical field and not for non-tech fields, but no, marketing uses it all the time in their market research, in their competitive research. You work for a company that asks you to do research on your competition. That's really OSINT. And if you have good OSINT skills, you'll be really good at your job. Something that may take you 10 hours may take you 1 or 2 hours if you learn the skill sets. I would say OSINT has a place in almost every field. It's not just a hobby anymore. It's a very formalized field. So it can either enhance those fields or be the core of that field as well. So OSINT is pretty broad.
So as far as the OSINT tools, are they available on Windows too, or is it mainly like Linux?
I would say the majority of the OSINT tools, quote unquote, require a browser. So it's all different websites or different techniques that require a browser. Probably 95% of it require a browser. So essentially any operating system. But then there are some shortcuts or some automation that you can do on Linux or code, running Python code or other codes you get from GitHub. And those run much better on a Linux environment. And there are Windows tools as well. Well, today you can run Linux on Windows as well. So there's really no limitation on your operating system. I choose Linux or Kali Linux specifically because there are some built-in tools in it that I can use, things like Burp Suite or certain other command line tools that are pre-built, and I don't have to install it. And the other reason is once you mess around with a lot of these tools, as every hacker or tinkerer knows, that you're going to break stuff. You're going to spoil your operating system after a while because you're going to get really curious. So I would rather do it on a virtual machine with Linux installed on it or Kali Linux, and then after every couple of months, just delete it, start over. I don't want to touch my primary machine for those type of installation things.
Yeah, that's one of the difficult things about, or one of the reasons I don't like to install Kali bare metal, because you're going to have, at some point, you're going to break it and have to reinstall.
Yeah.
So at least if you're using VMs, that's a little bit easier than having to totally rebuild your system. Mm-hmm. So as far as like helping pen testers, what kind of, using OSINT, what do you recommend for them? Someone that's got some experience in pen testing and they're trying to become a better pen tester, what would you recommend as far as OSINT for pen testers?
Yeah, I would say a lot of my pen testing started, I'm sorry, a lot of my OSINT started because I was doing pen testing to kind of make my skill sets better. And so there's so many types of pen testing: internal, external, wireless, social engineering, and web application pen testing, just to name a few. In some of those, OSINT is very, very useful. I would say in social engineering, it is the most useful. So I used to do a lot of social engineering, either emails or vishing calls or maybe in person. And I would see that if I'm not prepared, I had a lot of chances of failure. But if I did a lot of OSINT, a lot of reconnaissance about my target, about what type of interests my target has, what time of day they're there, where are they going based on their social media presence, I could craft that phishing email perfectly well so that they would click on it. So because my goal is for them to click through. Or I could craft the perfect conversation online saying, hey, I'm calling, about this vendor relationship that you have. And yeah, sure, we do have that vendor product or whatever. How did you know? I mean, it's all through open source intelligence. So the more you spend time doing it, I would say 50% of my phishing or social engineering engagements were spent doing OSINT. The other 50% were actually just executing the attack. So in social engineering, absolutely, all sorts of research on your target, social media, online, LinkedIn, other records, business records or personal records online. All of that help in making that attack much, much stronger and better. I would say in external pen test is the same thing. When you're doing, when you're trying to reach certain firewalls or web services online or even web application pen testing, you do network-based OSINT. You need to know a lot about the network on DNS, web servers, web services online, some of the API calls that may be happening in the backend. What do they really mean? And OSINT will give you a lot of information on how to extract either more intelligence out of all that little pieces of information, package them in a report and say, based on all of this, my attack should, kind of be focused on this side. Because in pen testing, as you and I know, that we have limited time. Our scope is usually you have 1 week or 2 weeks to perform this attack, whereas the bad guys have, unlimited time. So in that time, we need to maximize our efforts. And I believe OSINT gives you that, one up against the rest of the pen testers because you come well prepared and now your attack has a higher chance of success.
Yeah, one of the things that I kind of see too, it seems like your social engineering is a lot more important now for external pen tests because things are getting a lot more difficult to gain a foothold. So I know either like finding password databases may be a way into a password spraying, but it seems like social engineering has become so more important for pen testers to use, and also I would say, since it's more emulating what real threat actors are doing, they do a lot of phishing email campaigns to send malware and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a perfect example of this. There was a target that I had, a paid pen testing gig where I sent about a couple of hundred emails to all their employees, and very few clicked. Nobody gave me credentials. Then I focused on one or two employees, and I went into the social media. I found that one of the guys, old passwords was golfer1. I'm like, all right, this person probably has an interest in golf. And obviously that password had changed, but this is OSINT. Seeing their interests, I went on their social media and eventually found that on Facebook, he was part of a golfing club. I'm like, all right, it's kind of confirmed. He is a golfer, or he loves golfing. So I crafted an email from that club, that very specific club, saying, you've got some VIP pass for an event that's happening in whatever, a couple of weeks, and you've been invited, invite only, and click here to kind of register. And he clicked immediately. That link went to a Microsoft online page where he put in his real credentials. I mean, it had nothing to do with the golfing event, but that's social engineering. You're hacking the mind. You're hacking the process there. And I got in. I got his real credentials. Now, all of that wouldn't have been possible if I didn't do the upfront work and researching that particular target.
So the tools you're using, are they mostly free tools?
They're all free tools. I believe in using all the free tools available. There are paid tools as well, but I believe that you can do everything from a free perspective that some of these paid tools do. They just package multiple tools together and they make it a little bit more convenient, like a one-click method and stuff. But I never want to be tied into any either paid tool or some tool that I don't know how it works. So if there's a website that claims to do some reconnaissance, you put in an IP address or a username and it brings you 50 other websites that have the same username and stuff like that. I'll use it, but then I'll find alternate tools and I'll see how they're really doing it in the back end, so that in case this tool goes away, which happens a lot, websites go down or they get bought out by someone or they raise their prices after a while, it gets too popular. At least I have a backup plan. At least I know how it works and I can recreate it using my free version, my free tools, or the bookmarks that I've saved. So I'm a big believer in doing it the free way. And I would add to that if it's not free, then you can't have anyone else recreate it. An aspect of OSINT is for law enforcement investigations. So if I'm doing an investigation on a target and I give that investigation, hand it over to law enforcement, they need to recreate everything I did. And if one of that pieces of information is behind a paywall, pay $5 to get access to this breach record, well, law enforcement can't do it anymore. They're not going to pay $5 for so many different resources. So they're going to ask, where did you get it? Oh, here's the links in it and it's free. Click on it and you'll get the information. So that's why even more I lean towards the free tools.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that's one of the things too with pen testing, I think is important too. Don't kind of get your input, but if you're doing a pen test for someone and sometimes they want to go back and duplicate what you did or retest after you tested. And it seems like the more steps you provide and make it easier for them to duplicate, kind of the better value you're giving your customer.
Oh, absolutely. And the client needs to remediate some of those things too. So how are they going to remediate if they can't recreate the steps? So yeah, you're absolutely spot on.
So why don't we, because I know recently you've kind of ventured off into business for yourself, if you kind of describe kind of what you do through your consulting services.
Sure. I mean, I was doing a lot of side gigs for the past couple of years. Some of them involved pen testing. Some of them were on OSINT investigations and then privacy management. So I kind of covered the whole gambit of things from technical to consulting as a virtual CISO. Eventually, a breaking point came where I wanted to do this full time, and I kind of parted ways with my full-time employment for the first time in my life. So it was kind of scary, but I had enough income coming through these side gigs where I said, it's time to formalize all of this and make my own company. So what I do now is either due diligence investigations for companies using OSINT skills, and then at the same time, kind of like a yin yang of that, the opposite of OSINT is privacy management. So then I do privacy management for executives, which is basically managing their entire personal lives, not just corporate lives, but their data expunction online, getting rid of personal information, making sure they're private so that hackers can't exploit and misuse that data. Because a part that I kind of figured out when doing a lot of virtual CISO engagements with clients is you can consult them on the corporate side, and there's plenty of resources there. You can test it using pen testing. You can fix their networks doing assessments and remediation efforts. But then social engineering comes along and somebody, phishes you or sends you an SMS on your personal mobile number or personal credit history that they extract it, or they can't reach you, so they'll reach out to your wife and kids or husband or whatnot. Now it goes out of the realm of the corporation, and their IT team can't do anything about it. So that's where I kind of come in and say, all right, let me handle the executives' personal privacy, scrub their presence online, not all of it, create that balance that they require by being a public figure, and then, making it much, much harder for the bad guys to exploit personal information that's out there. So that's what I kind of do now, a balance of OSINT and privacy management, as well as providing that bigger infrastructure of a virtual CISO. If anyone needs a virtual CISO and can't afford a full-time CISO, mostly mid-sized organizations, they can hire me as their as a fractional CISO.
So how was that to learn kind of the CISO role, being so technical, doing pen testing and OSINT? So how was that to learn the OSINT role and be able to function there efficiently?
So I think it came naturally to me because in my past jobs, I was doing pretty much everything, jack of all trades. I was doing a lot of pen testing, then I was doing a lot of consulting with clients. They didn't call it CISO, but I was consulting them on frameworks, on how to patch certain things, how to create policy. At the same time, I was doing technical work. So I was the guy actually implementing some of the security controls that I was telling them. So I was kind of hybrid role between technical and consulting, or strategy versus tactics. And I would call that phantom CISO. And that's kind of how I created that book and this term as well, that I wasn't a real CISO, or at least I didn't have the title, but I was performing the job duties of one.
So this is the book that Mishaal's mentioning here. So we'll have links to the show notes where you can get your copy of it. So I think that's really awesome that the services you're offering, because, some people do vCISO and it's all management. Maybe they're technical enough to do some architecture, but to be able to provide the services you're doing, and you're able to go deeper, because some companies performing vCISO services don't understand offensive security and the OSINT piece. Mm-hmm. And if there's not someone in the organization, then the customer has to go to someone else to provide those services and further guidance.
Agreed. And having a person who has a background in pen testing and showing them how it's done, and essentially coming with that hacker mindset. I know what the other side does. I know how hackers hack, like from a technical perspective, so I can help you defend against those things. So my philosophy is I'm very impatient when it comes to my clients. I'm like, listen, you have to do this. You have to put in MFA. That's going to stop the bleeding. Let's do it today, not tomorrow. Let's not get 5 quotes and all that stuff. I can do it in an hour if you allow me. So I'll have resources. I'll plug them in and say, all right, let's get this done. And clients like that. Like, there's different types of clients. Maybe the really large corporate ones, have a bigger timeline to do things, and they may not like the strategy. But the mid-sized ones, they're like, they need help today. And I'm like, I'm the guy for you. I'm not just talking fluff. I'm not just going to talk strategy. I'm going to start with strategy. But right after that conversation, let's go straight into tactics. Let's really implement the things I just talked about. And having a background working with a lot of MSPs, MSSPs in the past, I know a whole myriad of products that are available. You need MFA, here's the 5 products you should use, I recommend. You need a firewall, here's what I recommend. MDR, XDR, whatever, email security. I have that knowledge, so I kind of cut down the cycles of including 10 other folks in the conversation, because what was typically happening is a CISO would talk through strategy and say, all right, we need MFA. All right, let's talk through our solutions architect in the next call, or then our technical solutions engineer in the third call. I'm like, dude, I can handle all of that in one 10-minute conversation. Let's cut through all the nonsense and just get straight to business. And honestly, a lot of people like that strategy.
I'm sure, to save the time, because CISOs and management, they have so many calls as it begins with, and that's all they need is more calls. And I would imagine going with a solution like yours, I would imagine it would be less costly, since you've got so many different people in the mix, and even some
sure.
of the maybe third parties.
Sure. Not only is it much cheaper because it's a fractional CISO, it's a virtual CISO, it's not a full-time CISO, and they don't require somebody full-time, because if it was full-time, they'd be sitting twiddling their thumbs and they'd be paying for nothing. So it's not only cost-effective, but it gets their stuff done way faster, I've noticed, because you're dealing with one person who knows many different fields. And also on the client side, I'm dealing with the right people, the people who actually want me to be there, not people who just want a CISO, but people who want change done, and that's why they hire me. And it goes both ways. I will pick and choose my clients as well. I will interview them and say, hey, do you really want change? Do you have budget? Are you giving me the authority for change? Is there going to be any friction from the executives? If everything's in my favor and I'm going to succeed, that's when I take that job and say, all right, we're all in this to win together. And once that mindset is set, that's when we go in and offer this service. So not only do I bring my expertise, I bring in a network of resources. And that's the beauty of running your own business is, sure, my business is very slim. I don't have a lot of employees. It's just 2 partners, and everyone else is kind of, partnering with us. So I know people. I bring a network of knowledgeable people with me. So if there's a pen test, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to hire a pen tester, which they're going to get introduced to somebody who's better skilled than I am to perform the task. So people like this model a lot.
Yeah, that's very good. So for folks that are wanting to get into doing vCISO work, what do you recommend?
I recommend starting with assessments, because I would say the heart of a virtual CISO or any CISO is understanding risk. You need to understand the bigger picture, not just the smaller bubble that you may be living in as an engineer and not knowing the business side of the risk. Do a gap analysis on yourself. If you want to be a CISO, and that's kind of what the book is, the gist is doing a technical versus soft skill balance and a gap analysis on yourself. If you lack certain skills to get the job done, and this could be managerial skills, this could be project management skills or communication skills, brush up on those skills first, and then you'll be in a much better position to be an effective CISO. Otherwise, if you jump into it, you won't be successful at all. So know your weaknesses. A lot of the CISOs I see come from a CFO background or business only background. They need to brush up on their technical skills, and vice versa. So once you're ready, and by doing your own gap analysis, and once you've kind of have a little experience in each realm of these categories, you've done some technical project management work, you've done some level of pen testing, even a junior level, or at least know about it, then you're ready to be a CISO, because now you come with multiple skills to the table, and now you're actually valuable and not just one more meeting on someone's calendar.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I know a lot of people are trying to make it to that next level, and they've been in technical for years, or maybe they're management trying to make that next step. So that's some very interesting and valuable advice.
I would also say it's not for everyone. So a lot of people are like, yeah, that we want to be a CISO, but a lot of people I've asked is, we don't want to be a CISO. There's a lot of stress that comes with it, a lot of responsibility. We're comfortable where we are, and this is our path. So yeah, it's not for everyone as well. So I wouldn't recommend everyone to follow this path. But even in the book, I mentioned that you should at least know what a CISO is responsible for, what their responsibilities and roles entail. So even if you don't want to be one, you will at some point have interactions with the CISO. So you should know their place, your place, what everyone should do, and how everyone can work together to get the job done.
So since you deal with a lot of management folks, higher up senior managers and so forth, what is a good way for someone to learn how to communicate in business terms with the board and the CFO and other folks that may not know the technical jargon? How's the best way to communicate?
It's a skill set. I say practice explaining something really technical to your little kids who are maybe 10 to 15 years old, and they understand a little bit of technology, but not enough, and explain to them, explain to your child what MFA is and why you need it without saying anything technical at all. So people care about results. People care about, all right, what am I going to get after this process? What's in it for me? And if you think of it from their perspective and not yours, not a selfish perspective, then you're going to get the message across. And then you're also going to actually reassess your own priorities and say, you know what, maybe this security control that I've been bugging them about isn't really high priority, because after I explained it to them, it didn't seem like it's too valuable. So let's move on to the next one that may add more value to them. Like I've explained to a lot of people, like password managers is something that is so difficult for management to adopt. All my passwords are 100, 150 characters long, or whatever the website's upper limit is. And I've been doing this for a while. To me, it's second nature. I would never put a password up for 8 characters or something I actually remember. But to explain this to them, yeah, I would fail immediately. So the way I explain it to them is, I say this in most of my presentations as well. I say, hey, I'm getting old. I can't remember a lot of passwords, and there's like hundreds of websites that I need to interact with usernames and passwords. But my memory is going away, and I can only remember 1 or 2 passwords. And that's actually what I do. I remember one nice, long, proper password, which is going to unlock my password manager. And then every single other password, why do I need to remember it? You guys remember 10, 20 passwords? Wow, you're smarter than I am. I can't do that. I just use a password manager. And then they're like, wow, that's pretty smart. And then I show them a quick demo. I'm like, hey, look, let me log into Twitter and show you my 100-character password. And I log in and I touch my little YubiKey next to it, 2-factor, and boom, I'm done. I'm like, how long did that take? 2 seconds? Maybe 3 seconds? How long do you take to log in? Wow, 10, 15 seconds? Nah, you're wasting your time. And when you actually show them the value, oh, time, I'm wasting resources. I could be doing something else, or I'm protecting myself from the next breach. I show them their own passwords. Once they see it, they get involved. They're like, you know what? I don't know why I haven't implemented this years ago. Let's do it tomorrow. I'm like, cool, it worked. So it's your approach to knowing who your audience is and having that, bridging that gap. And that's a skill. I'll admit, a lot of people fail at this, especially the technical folks, because they don't know how to look at something from someone else's perspective. And once you start doing that, practice it a lot with people. People don't have patience, and people really don't care about you or your job. They care about themselves. So make it about them. I mean, generic advice, and it's kind of common sense, but do it in your professional world, and you'll start seeing change.
Yeah, great advice. So we kind of discussed kind of the technical things and your business. So one of the things that, for those listening that don't know you, is you kind of mentioned some training. So we could kind of get into the types of training you do and the different platforms and stuff you offer your training on, because I know you do a lot of stuff in person. And I just saw recently that you've got your new course on just hacking, or just hacking training. And so if you wouldn't mind kind of going into details of some of your trainings and where they can be found.
Sure, yeah. I started off a lot of my training on at Wild West Hacking Fest in South Dakota. And that was so it's a hacking community there. The audience is all very, very technical. So my course there was next level OSINT. It's really advanced level OSINT course. But then a lot of people started asking me, like, how do I get to that? That's in person only. And in person because I get to interact with people, they get to ask questions, and it's much better when you're in front of people when you want to train them. Because my philosophy on training is if you can find it on YouTube or an article about a certain technique that I'm talking about, I don't want to talk about it. I'll just point you to that article or that video. We're all wasting our time. So my physical presence should be of value. And that's where we kind of exchange notes and have lots of examples. I walk them through my techniques because people want to know how you do it. And that's basically the value of my training. It's not how you should do it. It's how I do it. And maybe you can get some value from it as well. And people love that. So now I've started a beginner level OSINT training for the masses, for a wider audience, which is on justhacking.com. That's John Hammond's initiative. And it's been released for the past couple of weeks now. And what I plan on doing there is creating an intermediate level course as well for OSINT, and eventually an advanced level OSINT course, which is all online, but then maybe supplemented with some in-person training. So that's kind of my journey on the training side. But with that, I also supplement some privacy training. So I'm in the process of creating an OPSEC for security professionals training. And a lot of security professionals focus too much on hacking and then maybe OSINT, but then they don't protect themselves. So I have a whole course coming on justhacking.com on OPSEC for security engineers or security professionals, which is really going to help people protect themselves in their professional careers. And every now and then, like when I met you earlier this year in Florida, in that Hackspace Con, I was giving the same course there, the Next Level OSINT course. It's a 16-hour course in 2 days. It's pretty intense. So I'll do it a couple of times a year at different cybersecurity venues mostly. So that's kind of where you can find me at cybersecurity events. And for private sector events, for companies, I'll do like a security awareness type of training course or instant response course, because that's more on the business side of things and they benefit more from that. So it's between that and consulting, I keep myself pretty busy.
Yeah, I imagine so. So, the hot topic these days is AI. So what are your thoughts on AI? Are you using it to help your in your business?
I mean, AI to me is one more buzzword. There's a lot of hype on it. Obviously, AI is not going to take over the world or anyone's job, as people feared initially. But I use AI every day to enhance my skill sets, either to learn something new or have a tool like ChatGPT, shorten my process. So I'll have a lot of code and I'll throw that piece of code in ChatGPT and say, how do I do this with this code? It'll understand the code within seconds and give me an alternate way to do it. Or, I'll enhance my stuff. I won't start from there. Absolutely not. AI is not there yet where it can do better than humans. I don't believe so. But I'll always ask it to kind of shorten my time frame. So it's to my benefit. I'll do image generations with AI tools. I'll do a lot of text-based stuff, and like a lot of the talks I go through, I put in notes. I'm like, all right, here's what I want to talk in this 1 hour speech. I'll tell AI, here's all my notes on this, a page worth of notes. Can you make a small description, no more than 1 paragraph? And it does an amazing job at that. So that's my use cases for AI, not so much in hacking or privacy. It's just a tool to enhance your text, audio, video, those type of things. I will say I have used voice cloning a lot on phishing calls or vishing engagements, where previously I would use my own my own voice to kind of deceive people on the other side as if I'm tech support or someone else. And so that was the social engineering engagement in the past. Now with voice cloning, it's become so perfect. Like you can clone anyone's voice in a matter of minutes or seconds. I use those now in my vishing engagements, and they work surprisingly well. I would say the face cloning or the deep fakes is the other thing that's really going to get better and real time pretty soon. And those will be used for malicious purposes. But as pen testers, we should be using those in our engagements as well to kind of spread awareness on here's the techniques being used.
Yeah, I can see a lot of need for just awareness training alone using those type of AI tools. Mm-hmm. So as far as, you kind of mentioned automating stuff. So what are your recommendations for people that are kind of trying to automate tasks in pen testing or OSINT?
I would recommend first, write down your notes on what you want to automate. So when I do a lot of these tasks, I create a lot of bash scripts and stuff. And the initial goal is always, here's 10 tasks that are pretty mundane, and I can do this with this command line or pull this data from here, put it somewhere else. I would automate those type of things. And instead of using my brain power to do the syntax work, I use my brain for the logic piece. And I say, all right, here's all the logic that I came up with. Now it's going to take me another couple of hours to come down with the right syntax and then troubleshoot it. And when you're coding, every comma, semicolon, everything matters, and it takes hours and hours sometimes to troubleshoot. That's what I would give AI to. I'd say, here's a piece of code that I made, make it work. It's not working. Or change this to, Python, or it's written in C++. What's the Python equivalent of something like this, or those type of things. So it takes a lot of human brain power to do something like that. And that's the advantage of AI. I wouldn't use AI for fact checking or intelligence work. Like I always say, AI it may be artificial, but it's not intelligent, because there's so many examples out there of it throwing out dumb stuff at you. So that's what I would use it for: automating scripts, automating multiple little tasks, text-based stuff. And we got to realize what's AI's strength today. It's a large language model, which is it's really good at text. It's really good at understanding and reading a lot of text and then giving you whatever you need from it: summarization, expansion of points, or nitpicking things out of it. Use it for that.
Very good. So we're getting down towards the end of the episode. Is there anything you'd like to discuss that maybe we didn't cover?
No, I would just say that, this field is amazing and huge, field of cybersecurity. And I always steer people in the right direction. Like a lot of these kids come to me for asking for advice or mentorship. And I say, start where you have passion. Do a little bit of everything and quickly understand that, what do I want to do for the next couple of years? With that mindset, there's so many things to do. So you're not really stuck in one place. Listen to everyone. You may not agree with everyone, but then make up your own mind. Don't fall in that trap of pen testing is the only way, or GRC is the only way, or OSINT is just for fun and not a career path. No, don't listen to any of that. Listen to everything and then make up your own mind and follow your passion, because eventually, as you do things because of passion, you'll love doing it. You'll spend 16 hours a day working and not feel that you've worked at all. And you'll be, pretty happy in life, because the end goal should be personal satisfaction. You should be happy doing what you love and not just making money. So my advice would be, don't run after money, run after your passion, and money will run after you then.
That's great advice. And I can tell that you take that same advice in your own career. So
try to practice what I preach.
Yeah, that's good. And thanks for taking the time to be on my show.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Phillip Wylie Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, to learn more about Phillip, go to thehackermaker.com and connect with him on LinkedIn and Twitter @Phillip Wylie. Until next time.